All right, guys, I think we can do a lot with ChatGPT and we can definitely replace our junior or media senior developers. Hello and welcome back, everyone. We are going to experiment with ChatGPT 4. I have just subscribed to ChatGPT 4 and I have, of course, paid $20 for it. So let's get started with it. I have created an assignment which you generally get from companies for as a .NET developer. I took it as assignment and this is for a senior .NET developer assignment, and we are going to do this assignment with ChatGPT 4 and believe me, when you get these type of assignments, being a senior .NET developer, you get irritated from those employers because they just send you these default assignments which takes around like somewhere from 2 to 6 hours, but you don't want to do these assignments because these are boring assignments sometimes. So let's get started and let's see if ChatGPT 4 can really do an assignment of a senior .NET developer. Guys, let's get started. All right, guys, I am in my ChatGPT 4. It was selected ChatGPT 3.5. I created the assignment using 3.5 and now I'm gonna start using ChatGPT 4. You see ChatGPT 4 currently has cap of 25 messages every 3 hours for me, and I am a ChatGPT Plus subscriber. So let's get started. What it does. So I have copy pasted this assignment and until point 7, and we will see later. And I will just copy paste it. So just to go through it, assignment: develop a RESTful API for customer management system. Description: as a senior .NET developer, you have been assigned to develop RESTful API for a customer management system that will serve as a backend for our application. The API should provide CRUD operations to manage customer data. Tasks are analyze the requirements and design the API endpoints and data models for customer management. I even did not put what do I want. I even want ChatGPT 4 to look for endpoints. Let's see what it does. This is really crazy. You are asking it to develop endpoints which you even don't know. But then the next important point is implement the necessary authentication authorization mechanisms such as token-based authentication or OAuth to secure the API, which is the basic requirement for each API. And then create an API controller and define CRUD operations for managing customer data using ASP.NET Web API or ASP.NET Core. So I will be a bit specific here, or let's just try like this, and then I'll be a bit more specific. Let's just get started with this. And later on, I have also asked it to develop something to how to efficiently retrieve customer data, store it using SQL Server or MongoDB, ORM framework like entity frameworks, and later on I will be a bit specific. So let's see what it does. So okay, let's see how it does. Requirements analysis and design. The first point, API endpoints are these ones. So it created few API endpoints. It is creating now the data model. Now it is creating authentication and authorization. Okay, it is creating the controller along with all the CRUD operations we need, and now data validation. All right, guys, I am in my ChatGPT 4. It was selected ChatGPT 3.5. I created the assignment using 3.5 and now I'm gonna start using ChatGPT 4. You see ChatGPT 4 currently has cap of 25 messages every 3 hours for me, and I am a ChatGPT Plus subscriber. So let's get started. What it does. So I have copy pasted this assignment and until point 7, and we will see later. And I will just copy paste it. So just to go through it, assignment: develop a RESTful API and sanitization. Okay, pagination, sorting and filtering. It is asking me to continue generating, and I will continue generating. Okay, it gave me some default API here, but let's make it a bit more difficult. This is just a generic code you can get from anywhere from online as well, but let's make it a bit difficult and bit more specific to our assignment. So I will retype the assignment here and change it a little bit. So I would say it's not an assignment. Develop a RESTful API for customer management system, and the description is, I would not say as a, and I will say develop a RESTful API for customer management system that will serve as backend for web application, and it is a CRUD API. Okay, and simple managed customers, so which will add CRUD operations, and then I will not add this part because this is not good, and then implement the necessary authentication authorization mechanism, and we are going to do with OAuth. Using OAuth to secure the API, create the API controller and define CRUD operations for managing customer data using ASP.NET. And I will specify here .NET 7. Design and implement appropriate API routes following REST API principles for retrieving customer information, creating new customer, updating, and this implement pagination and filtering for efficient retrieval of customer data, integrate with a database, and I will specify SQL Server. To store and retrieve customer information, design and implement the necessary data access layer. Design and implement the necessary data access layer using entity framework. Okay, we are a bit specific here, and let's see what it does. It gave me some default API here, but let's make it a bit more difficult. This is just a generic code you can get from anywhere from online as well, but let's make it a bit difficult and bit more specific to our assignment. So I will retype the assignment here and change it a little bit. So I would say it's not an assignment. Develop a RESTful API for customer management system, and the description is, I would not say, and so it is just telling me about how to get started. So for authentication and authorization, I need to go to implement OAuth authentication and authorization. You might use identity server or Azure Active Directory. For this, you would need to configure OAuth middleware in the startup.cs. We will talk about it again later. I would like to do the dependency injection, but first I would like it to implement this. So I would like it to display the startup.cs, but we will talk about it later. Then it created an API controller, which it created previously as well. Customer controller base, and then it created data validation. For incoming data validation, you could use data annotations, nice, and model state can be checked before processing the operation. So it added the attributes, so string length, email address, phone, which is good. And then it also, for pagination, sorting, and filtering, it added this nice thing which a lot of people struggle to do actually. So nice. And then data access layer, it created a data access layer using customer DB context, and DB context is like this. Okay, till now it is still the basic API, and we haven't talked about unit testing yet. We haven't talked about authentication. So let's continue with, can you write authentication and authorization in startup.cs? So now it is talking about doing it properly. So now it really asks me to add this package, which is the basic requirement for doing it with identity server, and nicely it created the startup.cs, which is more and which is really important part of this And it is again talking about the methods we are having and explaining it, which is again really really mastering the development. You see here it is talking, it has injected the service collection, the way we do the startup, add authentication, bearer type, add authorization, and using these scopes, and then configure and add this proper API development here. Okay, so now I'm fine with it, but what is missing here is we have implemented authentication authorization API controller, and we also have data validation, sanitization, paging and sorting, data access, and okay, so that is fine till now. So can you please help me making unit tests for this application here? Okay, so it will start now. It is gonna use, I didn't tell it, so it is by default going to use X unit. And going further with the controller test, okay, get by ID, blah blah. Okay, this is a default, and I see it properly, I see it doing it properly. So it is mocking repository, and it has already mocked it here, mock repository, customer repository. Nice. And it has created customer repository, which was missing, which I wanted to talk about it and say here when it was here, when it did not implement it here. So, and perfectly it is thinking in that way that it will need customer repository to do it that way and make it using the dependency injection properly. Okay, perfect. And then it goes on, and in these examples 2 tests are conducted. So by default it is giving me these documentation as well, so I can easily copy paste this documentation in my assignment, which is again the best thing. Okay, can you write authentication and authorization in startup.cs? So now it is talking about doing it properly. So now it really asks me to add this package, which is the basic requirement for doing it with identity server, and nicely it created the startup.cs, which is more and which is really important part of this. And it is again talking about the methods we are having and explaining it. Now we need to have exception handling. So I added another line, implement exception handling and error responses to provide meaningful feedback to API consumers in case of errors in invalid requests. And then second request, I added document the API using tools like Swagger or OpenAPI and provide concise documentation for developers who will be consuming the API. Now let's see what it does. So exception handling and error responses, you can use built-in error handling middleware in ASP.NET Core. You can create a custom middleware to handle exceptions, and it is talking about adding user exception handler in the startup, which is kind of okay. Tell me in the comments how will you do it better than this one. I am sure you can do better than this, but let's see if you know better than this one. And then for the documentation, it is adding swashbuckle ASP.NET Core and adding it in the startup. Perfect. And properly adding the documentation for the API. Now you should be able to access Swagger API by having /swagger to your API's URL and display the models. Okay, perfect. Okay, once we have Swagger, now it's time to implement logging and monitoring for solutions to track API users, identify performance bottlenecks, and troubleshoot issues. And second task is deploy the API to production environment following CI/CD practices and ensure its proper operation and scalability. Let's see what it does. Basically, it will be preferring, I think, Azure for all the solutions it will be giving. And let's see what it does. For the logging purpose, it is for logging and monitoring. You can use combination of built-in logging features in .NET along with tools like Serilog, Elastic Stack, Elk Stack, Elasticsearch, Logstack, Kibana for logging and monitoring. It is really not really suggesting Azure solutions, but all other solutions, everything. I think this is perfect. For Serilog, it is also giving you an example. How can you add Serilog? Perfect. And then for the deployment and CI/CD. So for deployment, you can use Azure App Services, AWS Elastic, Beanstalk, Google App Engine. So it is suggesting everything, whatever you need. And then you can even specify in this question, you could specify, I want to use Azure App Service. So you can set up CI/CD pipeline using tools like Azure DevOps, Jenkins, GitLab, and CI/CD. In typical CI/CD pipeline, you will start by setting up source control, Git repository, build pipeline. You will then set up release pipeline and deploy it to your environments. Setting up CI/CD pipeline involves many details specific to your project setup, but this is the general purpose process you will go through. So it gave me a generic answer for this part because I did not specify anything that I can give benefit of doubt to it. But for logging purpose, it really gave me also many options. So again, I can specify with which option I want to go with. And let's see for the CI/CD part. Now I will specify a bit more about CI/CD and let's see if it gives me some Azure DevOps pipelines. So now I'm asking, please set up a CI/CD pipeline using Azure DevOps, and it will give me now an example of setting up CI/CD pipeline for Azure DevOps. Create a new project in Azure DevOps. Go to Azure DevOps portal and create a new project. Create a repository if required. Create a build pipeline. Go to pipeline, blah blah blah, and it is giving me the YAML part of it. So I can store it in my source code and then configure the pipeline using this YAML pipeline. Perfect. Let's see what it wrote in the YAML pipeline. Steps are .NET restore, build configuration from the build. Perfect. It took some variables, not just anything default. .NET test, logger trx, and then it publishes the artifacts, and then build artifacts, and then drop to a publish it to a container, drop it to a container. So now I'm asking, please set up a CI/CD pipeline using Azure DevOps, and it will give me now an example of setting up CI/CD pipeline for Azure DevOps. Create a new okay, so now it has generated everything you need, but I wanted to come up with a specific comprising of all the things we discussed above and come up with a final version of the API. So thank you, and let me put exclamation mark, and can you generate the final. Okay, let's see what it does. Okay, I will outline a high-level description of these steps necessary to incorporate mentioned aspects into ASP.NET Core. Perfect, and this is what I wanted. So this is how it is starting. Create a new ASP.NET Core Web API project. .NET new Web API, this set of entity framework, configure database connection, nice. Create a repository, customer repository. You see it is even talking about this interface, and then creating the repository class, implement authentication authorization like this, implement exception handling, and then Swagger, and then set up unit test, configure CI/CD pipeline. This is what a perfect developer can do. All right, guys, I think we can do a lot with ChatGPT, and we can definitely replace our junior or media senior developers. I would say one comment though, that you really need to babysit sometimes with ChatGPT and really need to tell it what to do or what are you expecting. So you need a senior developer in the team like we do PR review, but definitely you can shorten your teams. Thank you for watching Tech of the Day and have a nice day.